Alright, the phone's ringing. Looks like my mother's here. Hello? Hi, Mom. Hey, just a second, I'll ring you up. We're gonna do something a little different, okay? And with that, I rung her up. I had to press 9 twice. Now we wait for my mother to get up here. Hello.
Hi.
How are you? Hi. Oh, Mom. Hi. Hi, come in, come in. I was going to do a little interview with you on how life was in the 60s.
Oh, Brian, I don't feel like that today. Back in the 60s, we
Mom?
burned coal
Okay.
in a wood stove, and we burned wood in the wood stove. My job as a little munchkin was to bring in the wood and to bring in the coal.
Mom, the audience doesn't know that you were born on a farm.
Oh, I'm Trudy Roberts. My maiden name is Trudy Holtkamp. I was born June 9th in 1960, and I was born in Haywarden, Iowa. I was in Iowegian for about 5 hours, and then I escaped to South Dakota. And I proceeded to live on a farm for about 18 years, just outside of Alcester, South Dakota. And as far as my memories of my childhood, we used to have tons and tons of cats. In fact, you couldn't hardly walk out the door from
Without accidentally stepping on one.
Without accidentally stepping on one.
Yeah.
And then suddenly distemper, it's a disease that kills cats, took over our farm, and most of the cats died from distemper. But anyway, we used to have a coal stove and a wood stove, and we used to both burn coal and wood and corn cobs. And my job, that's how we kept the house warm. And my job was to bring in the coal and the wood. And I remember one time when I brought the wood in, Mom looked down at me and she said, "You're bleeding." I was bleeding all over my knee. And here I had fallen down and I didn't think I got hurt, but I was bleeding all over the place. I was a tough little cookie when I was a little kid.
Sounds like a true Holtkamp.
One thing I distinctly remember is cleaning out the chicken house. Mom grew chickens and sold the eggs. And if you've ever smelled anything really, really, really raunchy, you haven't smelled anything really, really raunchy until you've smelled chicken poop. Cleaning out the chicken house was not a job that I enjoyed at all, but every week we had to do it.
I went in a hen house once. The smell was still there, even though it hadn't been used for well over 20 years.
Oh, is that right?
That was when we went down to put your possessions in storage at a friend of Marlis's, or a friend of yours.
Sure.
Remember that?
Mm-hmm, I remember that.
Yeah, well, anyway, if I remember right, you had to bury Chubby nearby.
Yep.
But that never happened, unfortunately.
No.
Oh well.
Anyway,
back to the issue.
Back to the, moving right along here. My father used to put up hay. He owned a quarter of a section, which I don't remember how many acres it is.
I believe the section was 100 acres.
Oh, could be. But anyway,
They like rounding up like that, sorry.
He farmed alfalfa and corn and oats. That was his mainstay for planting crops. And we used to bale hay, and I would help on the flatbed stacking the bales. There was a certain way you had to stack them so that they didn't fall off by the time you got home. And I remember one time I was down there by myself unloading bales, and I was doing it really fast, and Dad looked out the window of the barn and he said, "Hey, who's down there helping you?" I was just a strong gal, and I was going to it. Most farm girls were hard workers back in those days. We didn't have computers and stuff like that to play around with. Oh, speaking of playing around, we used to play house out in the grove. We'd make our house out of twigs, and then we'd have mud pie contests. We'd make pies and throw mud pies at each other and see who could make the biggest mud pie and get the other one the dirtiest. And
Sounds
back
like
to the
fun.
subject of hay, I used to help my father jayhawk hay.
What's jayhawking?
A jayhawk is a machine that's, or a piece of equipment that's attached to the tractor, and it's got wooden teeth on it with metal tips on the end. And when you cut down the alfalfa, you make a windrow. It's a roll of hay, and with
so it kind of rotates.
With the jayhawk, you go around and pick up the hay, zigzag around and pick up the hay, and then it has a automatic lift on it, or lift on it that you you drive around to the stack and you lift it up and you dump it onto the stack, and you try really hard not to dump it on Dad. Because Dad gets really mad when you dump it on top of it. I know, I did it a few times. But luckily, I was down there with the lift, and the only way he had to get down was me, so he didn't get too mad at me. And we used to not have running water. We used to have to go up to the pump, a pump that was a manual pump. You had to pump water out of it. And I'd have to go up and get the water. And we had a pail and a dipper that we used to drink water out of. It was good water, nothing like the city water. It didn't have chlorine in it and all that kind of junk. It was good well water. And what I always hated about it was I always had to go by the cows. And most of the cows didn't bother me, except Dad had some Angus cows. They're all black and they look really mean. And they
almost look like bulls.
I'd go by them. But I never got attacked by one, so made it through that okay.
Let's see. There was a question on the tip of my tongue. Now I forgot it. Guess I'm not being a very good reporter. I'm just trying to do this for.
I had 3 older sisters, and Marlis, Lenny, and Sharon. And Sharon was the oldest, and she didn't help outside a lot. But Lenny helped outside a lot. She did a lot of the dragging. That's drilling rows in the ground, kind of tilling the soil. And a lot of the tractor work. She was kind of Dad's left hand. And I did a lot of, Marlis, she did a fair amount of helping outside, but I did a lot of helping outside too. I'd help Dad clean off the pig floor. And you had to be really careful because there was a hot wire fence around the pig floor, just above the fence, and if you hit that with the manure, you got a good jolt, not enough to kill you, of course, but enough that you felt it.
Had to be felt by the pigs.
No, yeah, the pigs kept the pigs from jumping over the fence.
Otherwise, you wouldn't have any pigs.
Well, actually, I don't know what the purpose of it was, because the pigs are so big that they wouldn't.
They couldn't jump. Pigs can't really jump that well.
Anyway, maybe it was to keep me in line. That's what I thought. I was a very naughty kid when I was little.
You probably shouldn't admit that on camera, Mother.
I was a really naughty kid when I was little. My sister would turn the radio up, and I'd race downstairs and turn the radio off, and they'd turn it back on, and I'd turn it down or turn it off. And one time they got so mad at me, they dragged me down the basement stairs. And another time they locked me outside, which was and it was in the dead of winter with no shoes on. And that was really a mistake, because Mom was teaching confirmation at the time, and when she came home I was standing outside with no shoes on, and she proceeded to get me inside and give all the other girls a spanking.
Oh yeah, talk about your mom a little. What was she like?
My mom was a very brave woman. She was a very intelligent woman. There was not a question that we couldn't ask her that she didn't know. She was a walking dictionary and a walking encyclopedia.
Sounds a lot like me.
And she used to work at Security Bank down in Sioux City, where she had an apartment with her sister Leona. And she used to have to take the money from the vault at the bank and carry it down to another place. I don't know how far away it was, but she had to carry a gun. and that just shows how trustworthy my mother was. And my mother also flew a airplane, solo flight.
She wasn't very trustworthy?
She was.
Oh, you said she had to carry a gun.
Yeah, so if somebody tried to attack her, she'd have to shoot them.
Well, yeah, but that wouldn't be a very trustworthy person.
Well, if you're going to carry a lot of money, baby, you better have a gun.
Good point. Good point.
And she flew I think she flew or traveled over every one of the 50 United States in her lifetime. They used to all pack up and take off in the car, not knowing where they were going, just out for a cruise, and they'd end up in Oklahoma or somewhere down south or somewhere up north.
What did she have licenses to fly?
Just a solo flight plane.
Oh, so like an old Cessna?
Yeah.
Maybe even a biplane?
I don't know.
Did they still have biplanes at that time?
I don't know, Brian.
Right, well, I suppose she wasn't exactly flying jets.
No, no.
They had just barely come to fruition back then.
No, she just flew solo flight. Just a regular.
So it was probably
plane.
a biplane.
Yeah, but she really enjoyed that. And she had to take us girls shopping with her because Dad wouldn't let her have a babysitter when she went shopping. And keeping track of us 4 girls, well, the older 3 weren't too bad, but keeping track of me was a real task. I was always running off somewhere. And one time we went down to Shriver's in Sioux City, and all the other girls were following Mom, and of course Trudy had to run ahead, and she hopped on the elevator real fast. We kind of as a get there before they do type of thing. And I turned around and opened my eyes, and the doors were shutting, and my family was nowhere in sight. And it took me up about 3 stairs or 3 flights of floors, and the elevator opened, and I knew they weren't up there, so I rode back down, and luckily it stopped on the floor that they were on. And I guess when the elevator opened, I was going like this, and my face was white as a sheet. But needless to say, that didn't slow me down any. I was still a roamer. I still was hard to keep track of. When I was about a year and a half old, I got run over by a tractor.
Ouch.
Just ran over by part of my legs. And I couldn't walk for about 6 months or so. And I was a terrible patient. My mother had a terrible time with me. I'd sit and scream because I couldn't walk or I couldn't run. I never did walk. I always ran wherever I was going. I was quite the woman.
Wait a sec, Mother. All right, we're good to go. Now, I have a question to ask you.
Okay.
What was healthcare like back then? I mean, like hospitals and stuff.
It wasn't primitive, but it wasn't nearly as advanced as it is now. I used to be a nurse's aide on neurology, and that was in the old building at Sioux Valley Hospital, and I don't know if the old building even exists anymore. If it does, it's used for administrative offices. And I also used to be a X-ray transporter, and I knew the hospital like the back of my hand. I knew everywhere there was to go because I had to transport people back and forth from places.
You were like a taxi driver in a way.
Yeah.
Except for you usually using a stretcher or a wheelchair.
Or a cart.
Yeah.
And now they've built onto the hospital so many times that I go in there and I'm totally lost. It doesn't even resemble the old Sioux Valley Hospital.
Oh, I bet.
But
Which one do you prefer, McKinnon or Sioux Valley?
McKinnon.
Yeah, I
I'm a
suppose.
trader. I prefer McKinnon. But